This is TWiT.
Like today, I think I know what we're going to talk about this week. If anything has been defined by one major thing, one major event.
Yeah. There was one major event that took place this week, as well as some other non-major events. But
Right.
I thought now would be a good time, given that we didn't get to see him earlier this week on MacBreak Weekly. I subbed in for him while he was out. Excited to say that we have the Rene Ritchie joining us here on the show to talk all things Apple event. Hello, Rene.
Hello, Mikah.
All right. So I know you have been busy, making videos and learning about these new devices and kind of going on a deep dive of understanding, which is what I always appreciate about the work that you do. So let's sort of rewind to the Apple event, which took place earlier this week. And it started, of course, with Apple TV Plus. We basically got to see some of the shows that are already here, some of the shows that would be coming in the future. And Apple kind of did some bragging about its very, very popular Ted Lasso show. But after that, then we started to get into hardware. So can you tell us about the first hardware announcement from Apple's event?
So we got an updated version of the iPad Nothing, the ninth generation, just iPad, the classic OG iPad. And that's the one that's been $329, a little bit less if your education pricing enabled. And Apple just keeps updating it steadily. They've updated it every September for the last few years. It's basically like an iPhone SE that gets updated more often. And it's their most popular iPad because it is so inexpensive. And it doesn't have all of the latest technologies, but Apple's been pretty good at pushing down more and more technologies to it. So it already works with the keyboards, works with the original Apple Pencil. And now it has an A13 processor in it as well, which means that it'll be snappier, sure, to use, but it'll also get software updates, iPad OS updates for the next 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years, which just makes it a better value to schools and anyone who's iPad curious who wants to get in on it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Apple seemed pretty clear about what that iPad Nothing, as you've called it, what it's for. And they talked a lot about using it as a sort of video conferencing or video chat device, and then it seems pretty heavy on education. Can you talk about, I find this peculiar, and I'm curious what kind of surrounds this. It does not support the second generation Apple Pencil. Instead, it works with the first generation Apple Pencil. Can you tell me why that first gen Apple Pencil is still around, and kind of if you had some sort of understanding or thought as to why Apple keeps that one around and uses it with certain devices?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we'll get to the iPad mini in a second, but now that the iPad mini's been updated, this is the only iPad that still uses Lightning. It's the only iPad that still uses the original Smart Connector, the only iPad that still uses the original Apple Pencil. And I think it's exactly for that reason. There are much lower end tablets, mostly video players, that are extremely popular, but they're mostly only used for video playing. And this has full iPad functionality, but Apple wants to maintain that $329 price so they can throw in a better processor because they think that's a good value. But the other stuff, they have to make their bill of goods. That's what anyone who's building a bill of materials, anyone who's building a device knows what their budget is for components, and they allocate that depending on what's important to them. And Apple's clearly saying that they think a lot of people are fine with that original pencil, fine with that original keyboard. They just want a really, modern processor in there, and that keeps the price down for them.
Got it. Yeah. I kind of at this point go, okay, if it's using that original Apple Pencil, it definitely feels like it's aimed at the education market in a big way. And then, in some other markets as well, but particularly with some of the third-party options that are available there for
the screen's still not laminated.
Work.
It's like you and I would look at it aghast, but everyone else is just, I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. So yeah, now we can talk about the big announcement that is actually quite small. I personally was pretty pumped about Apple's announcement for the iPad mini. Let's talk about how this little thing packs a punch.
Yeah, I mean, it basically got the iPad Air design that Apple used last year, but just in mini form factor. So the bezels got snapped down to about 3/4 the size. The home button got blipped out of existence. You've got Touch ID now and the power button. Because they kept the same Apple Pencil 2, they didn't make a mini Apple Pencil 2. They had to move the volume buttons to the top, but I think that's overall fine. And then it got the same sort of industrial design. Didn't get quite as many colors, which I'm a little bit salty about. I love me some colors. It did get purple. It didn't get green for you, so I was actually sad personally for you, Mikah.
Yeah.
But I think overall, it's the mini redesign that many fans have been waiting for.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the iPad Mini a little bit more. What is sort of looking back on your understanding of the iPad Mini and where it's fit in the lineup, and in your work at iMore originally, and then in your YouTube, what has traditionally the iPad mini device, what has it been used for by consumers? Sort of, if you've got this bigger iPad for education, where does the iPad Mini fit other than in my pocket whenever I get it?
Yeah, so I mean, like Steve Jobs was famously originally completely opposed to the idea of a small tablet, and Eddie Q got a Galaxy Tab and had to talk him into it. And I think in the beginning they thought it would be like a lower cost iPad, but it turned out that for some people the size was not a bug, it was a feature, and they wanted a premium experience. So the iPad Mini has never been like it was originally the cheapest iPad, but it's never been a cheap iPad. So I think that's been reserved for the older refreshed iPad, and the iPad Mini really is just always been a smaller Air. Or I guess technically the Air is a bigger Mini. That they've always been sort of in lockstep with design and features and functionality. So this really appeals to people who want the portability side. They don't care as much about screen size, but like me or a Notco want to be able to slip it into the back pocket of our non-hipster jeans, take it around everywhere, read our comic books, watch our videos, write out our notes, all of those sorts of things. And because Apple has no foldable, or for people who just don't like foldables, this is the closest you can get to a real pocket computer from Apple that has a more generous screen size.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, very sad that they did the iPad Air in green, but they did not do the iPad Mini in green.
Why do you hate Mikah?
Why? It's so sad. But there was another device that did get a green update, which is... So this is why I'm glad to be talking to you about it, because from the outside, it certainly seems like not a whole lot has happened to the next generation of the Apple Watch, the next series, I should say, for the Apple Watch. What's going on with Apple Watch Series 7?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. If you're conspiracy minded, the reason Apple doesn't pre-announce and the reason Apple hates leaks is because they quite often work on more audacious updates and then more conservative updates, because sometimes the more audacious ones don't always pan out. And this year there were a ton of leaks about a more massive redesign and maybe feature set that either was not planned for this year, but a future year, or just didn't work out this year. So we got something that's sort of in the middle. It got a bigger screen, which I think is good, because you can, as long as you don't make the watch itself monstrous, the bigger the screen, the better. So I really love that. It got some new colors. It didn't get the squared off edges, and the health sensors that all of us are waiting for. Apple every year works on them and buys new companies that swears that they are very close to them. And it's just, they always remain years and years out. So like blood sugar and blood pressure and all of these things are always coming and never quite arriving. But I think the goal of the Apple Watch is still very different. The market is nowhere near saturated. Even iPhone owners most of them still don't have Apple Watches. So what Apple does every year is try to reduce the roadblocks, the things that are making people not buy Apple Watches, and increase the feature set, ever so slightly to encourage more people to get it. So this year it's more resilient. It's got a crack-proof screen, which appeals to people who do more extreme forms of outdoor, biking or mountain climbing, those sorts of things. It's got that bigger display. It's got a wider variety of colors, and there's no real pressing need until they can really do a huge leap forward with the health stuff. I think this is sort of the iterative updates we're going to get for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that I would be remiss if we didn't briefly touch on some of the conversation surrounding the rumor mill and sort of what was announced, what wasn't. And you did mention it there just for a sec, but I know that going into this, there was some external expectation that we would see a flat-sided Apple Watch, and that there were some other kind of tidbits that were lost in that didn't end up coming to these devices. And for those of us who are in the press that are have been part of this for a long time, we know that all rumors always have to be taken with a grain of salt. But what are your thoughts just in general kind of on this particular event, and why maybe it seems that people are getting a little bit more schadenfreude joy for some reason out of lots of rumors being wrong?
I'm a big fan of personal responsibility. So like if you want to read the script for a new Marvel movie or Star Wars movie before it comes out and things change, because a lot of stuff is done on the day, you're going to see a movie that's ultimately different and has fewer surprises for you. And if you want to look at leaks for products, you're going to ultimately, or even like some companies famously leak their own stuff. Microsoft, because of their enterprise predilections, would announce product roadmaps years in advance and often not hit those roadmaps. So it's like really there's expectational debt, as our friend George Adao would say, or like expectations are the thief of joy, as Marquez said recently. You go, if you want to look at that stuff, that's fine. That's your choice. You look at it, but that doesn't bind the company to those things. And plans change, production becomes more complicated. Sometimes things are moved up, sometimes they're moved back. So just understand that what you're looking at is one of the many multiple multiverse possibilities from the what if universe, and not necessarily our universe.
That's a very good way.
Maybe we have the Captain Carter, Captain America. That could be.
Yes. The Loki iPad Mini is in another timeline. Yes. Unfortunately, not this.
The alligator Loki iPad Mini is the best one.
Exactly. All right, then let's move on to the big O's, the big devices, the ones that folks typically count on at a September Apple event, and that is Apple's next range of iPhones, iPhone and iPhone Pro, both with the 13 number. I have to say, Leo and I, we covered this event earlier this week, and it got to be an hour, and they had just finished talking about iPhone, and we thought, are they going to not announce an iPhone Pro this time? And then the event just went longer, and so there was an iPhone Pro. But tell us about what's new in the iPhone and I should say what's new in the iPhone 13, what's new in the iPhone 13 Pro.
All right, but I got to be real careful because I know Jason's sitting there ready to drag me and just, with the features Androids have had for years now, I'll get roasted if I don't do this really carefully.
That's right. That's right.
I know it's got the checkbox already. So this is what, it's very much an iPhone 12s style year. And that's the names are always just a marketing decision, but it's the chassis of the iPhone 12 with much improved camera systems for the 13, much improved camera systems for the 13 Pro. It's got the latest generation Apple Silicon, the A15, there's no new process shrink. Like it didn't go from 5 nanometers to 4 or 3 nanometers this year. So it's more like a 10% improvement. But Apple is spending that transistor budget that they have on post-core things, I think is a good way to say it, because the GPUs and CPUs are only going to get so fast before you start running into thermal envelopes or battery capacity issues, or just like you're over accelerating the chip. And Apple has been very clear in the past that sort of performance is a side effect of efficiency, and they've gotten really, really better efficiency this year, which means an hour and a half better battery life on the Mini and the Pro, and 2.5 hours better on the regular iPhone 12 and iPhone 13 and 13 Pro Max. But they've spent a lot of their budget this year on the camera pipelines, the video pipelines especially. So we're getting cinematic video with rack focus, which I can just imagine Serenity Caldwell's, mutual friend Serenity Caldwell's face when they announced this, because it's what she used to laboriously do manually every year. Now they use machine learning. So if you see eyes that are close to the frame, it locks on those, and then if those eyes turn away, it goes to the next set of eyes, and racks like basically follow focuses to that next set of eyes, and when the closer set of eyes turn back or come into frame, it moves back and forth, and it'll do that also if the eyes go away. It'll focus on items in the scene, and you can do it manually. And the part that's really, really cool is it saves all this data to the video so that you can go back in post and change the place of focus, change the depth of the bokeh, all of these things, which used to be almost ridiculous in hardware for a camera, but they're doing it with that processing power from the A15, which means it's not only calculating that frame of video, it's calculating the nearest neighbor frame so that the bokeh doesn't change and the focus doesn't change in between frames, which would be hella annoying. And it is limited to 1080p 30 for now because there's just not enough compute power to go to 4K yet. But the results looked really, really good in the demo. I mean, for a phone, it's not going to beat a red camera
exactly.
with a dedicated Hollywood focus puller, but for a phone, it looked pretty amazing.
Yes, definitely impressive, and it'll be fun to play around with that. I think the battery life, of course, was a big thing that we thought, wow, because already the phone, my iPhone 12 Pro Max, I don't have to charge during the day. And so even more battery life stacked on top of that, it's going to be quite nice. This time we got a lighter blue color for the Pro line, which is different. It's finally a bright light color as opposed to these deep, very serious colors that they've done. So we'll see where that goes. Any other kind of tidbits before we say goodbye? Any other tidbits that maybe we could have missed during the show that you want to talk about?
Well, it's not so much a tidbit, but like one of the things that like Apple isn't always first to things. They don't yote first ! 11 into the comment section of hardware very often. And with ProMotion, 120 hertz refresh rate, other phones have done it for years, but a lot of those implementations, like, I know like my previous Google Pixel phone, if the brightness got too low, it would shift the frame rate. It would ramp it back down again. And some of them, like some of the Samsungs, they would lose color management when you changed frequent refresh rate, or they change resolution. You have to pick between the two, or they just they simply couldn't manufacture LTPO OLED panels at the quantity that Apple needs, which is hundreds of millions of units. And this year, I'm going to put a huge finally, I think a Gruber approved finally on this one, and say that we got not just 120 hertz, but a really, really good implementation that goes all the way down to 10 hertz, all the way up to 120 hertz, but not just based on the content. They actually built into the silicon pipeline an always-on coprocessor for touch sensitivity. So as your finger slows down and speeds up on the screen, it'll slow down and speed up the refresh rate from that 10 hertz if you pause to that 120 hertz if you're scrolling, or like, maybe 30 or 60 hertz if you're on a menu for a game, and then 120 hertz when you start playing again, which means that ludicrously, even though the iPhone 13 Pro has up to 120 hertz now, it's getting even better battery life than the same sized iPhone 12, which has a regular 60 hertz screen. And I think it's those kinds of implementation details where Apple is, again, sometimes frustratingly slow, but often nails it in the landing.